Everyone knows Noel Noah stands at the pinnacle of the soccer world, being acknowledged for being the best player by just about everyone and their mother. But who is the second best player in the world of Blue Lock? I think deciding who doesn't make the cut when determining the world's second best player is the first and easiest thing to do, so we're going to start by narrowing down our options. Firstly, no one in Blue Lock should be in consideration for the title of the world's second best, excluding the team captains obviously. And this includes all of the foreign players that came into the Blue Lock program from Spain, France, Germany, and Italy respectively. Most of the Blue Lock players aren't even relevant, like some of the lower salary players aren't even worth talking about, but even the highest caliber players inside Blue Lock like Isaki, Reen, the NG11 shouldn't even be in a conversation like this. Kaiser is pretty simple, as Noel Noah was trying to spur Kaiser's growth forcibly to create a rival that can make him even stronger. In fact, the entire purpose of him joining the Neo Egoist League was for him to force Kaiser's evolution. And Kaiser does grow and evolve during the NEL undoubtedly, as we see his stat charts definitively go up in between these games. Despite this, in Game 4 of the NEL, Kaiser's final game, Noah tells Kaiser that right now, the biggest threat to him is Loki, and in the future when he's settled things with Loki, that Kaiser should come try and surpass him, indicating a pretty clear gap perceived by Noah himself, despite the strides Kaiser has made to his game in this league. So Kaiser, despite his sauce, shouldn't be in top 2 talks in the world. The same should and can be said about another of the NG11, Don Lorenzo. Inside Kaiser's final game of the NEL, we get his final stat chart as a Volume 30 extra, and these charts represent players' value within the confines of Blue Lock specifically. This chart rates Kaiser as a 98, and we get a chart of Don Lorenzo earlier inside the NEL, who only has a 96 rating. Even if he improved his rating since then, which is very possible, Kaiser is still viewed to be levels below Noah at a 98. Not to mention, Don Lorenzo's final salary is 120 million yen less than Kaiser himself, and even if he is comparable to Kaiser by the end of the NEL, like I just mentioned, that shouldn't be enough to get him in these talks. For the actual Blue Lock players, Isaki is pretty obvious, as he's just pretty relative to Kaiser himself. Whether or not you think he's slightly above due to his crazy manipulation, it shouldn't be too relevant, as Isaki also sees Loki's play and is completely floored with what he's witnessing. This is to the point where he considers Loki so much more talented than him that thinking and logic are completely meaningless, which by the way is Isaki's entire way of approaching soccer. Destroyer Reen may be closer than Isaki and Kaiser, but he's still pretty heavily implied to be below Loki just by Loki's dialogue and attitude towards him, and Reen respecting him as a master and his advice, despite them being nearly the same age. On top of this, even after displaying his Destroyer form, he's still valued as the same as Isaki by the world standards, which is probably only in part due to him playing like a complete tweaker when he's in this form. So he may be more skilled, but it doesn't make him necessarily gap the Blue Lock players below him inside an actual game. If we take him and Isaki from the Nigerian game, it is pretty apparent that they've leveled up, and I'm not gonna lie, we really just don't have enough information about them at this point to say how good they are, at least compared to pros. They very well could be high-end pro level, we just don't have enough information, as the point in time I'm scripting this video is towards the end of the Nigeria match. Sae, while usually propped up as an elite character by people in the story or Reen himself, doesn't really have much going for him in a conversation like this. As of right now, we have no idea how good of a player he is. You could imply he considers himself weaker than Bunny based on his reaction to seeing him, but we aren't exactly sure how good Sae is since his run-in with Bunny was likely a long time ago when he was in Spain. We don't know how much stronger Sae has gotten since that point. If you do think he's a worse player than Bunny, which I think is fair, then he's obviously eliminated from this list by default, because Bunny would then be second and Sae at best could be third. And while Bunny is implied to be a very elite player, being described as a superstar and the future of FC Barça in a news clipping, despite having Lavinho on their team, who was an elite striker that was also the master of Spain's roster in Blue Lock's NEL, this gives Bunny pretty good stock, but I think some other characters have better implications of being the world's second best. Getting into some of the heavy hitters, we have Loki. We see in brief moments of their game against one another that Loki and Noah are able to keep up with each other's flow states, with Loki far surpassing the play of Blue Lock's players and shaking Kaiser to his core by stopping his Kaiser impact on a penalty kick with his divine speed. There's also the statement, like I mentioned earlier, that Noah, the world's best player, sees Loki as his biggest threat currently. And this is in the context that he's talking about someone that can rival him as the world's best. Now, there is a few different things and ways to interpret this that doesn't mean outright that Loki is the second best flat out. The first thing is Noah could be talking about Loki in the near future and not currently. Even though he says right now Loki is his biggest threat, maybe he just means right now he's the biggest threat to potentially surpass him or potentially rival him. Not necessarily at this exact moment he is his biggest rival. Noah also possibly isn't considering another impressive player, Marc Snuffy. Since Snuffy has been retired from soccer, he wouldn't have a chance to be viewed as the world's best, as he's obviously retired. Or it's very possible that Noah's statement about his biggest threat being Loki is in regards to a rival striker, which Snuffy isn't really known for, as he's much more of an all-arounder. Getting into Snuffy himself, he's one of the rare cases of a player that isn't an outright striker and is an excellent all-around player. He is described as a watchman by Isaki that acts behind the scenes to support his teammates. Noah, when talking to Isaki about Snuffy's abilities, describes him as having a deep understanding of physical contact and world-class hold-up plays, ball retention, passing, and shooting. He continues by saying that Snuffy isn't in the same class as him as a striker, but in terms of cumulative skill, Noah considers him the best player in the world. Perhaps even more insane than that is the next statement that Noah says about Snuffy when Isaki asks how he can be defeated, and Noah simply responds as bluntly as possible that he doesn't know, and they simply just have to endure him. In terms of stats and feats, just like Loki, he's capable of playing on the same physical scale as Noah, and even with Isaki assisting Noah, they still struggle to get the jump on Snuffy and steal the ball from him. Additionally, Snuffy has high-level metavision that completely transcends Game 2 Isaki's metavision, which isn't too impressive, not gonna lie, but it's at least worth noting. Additionally, something that's overlooked and I think is pretty interesting is he might have Predator Eye based on what Barrow says about him. This statement is sort of up to interpretation, but in chapter 228, when Barrow starts to buck out of Snuffy's system, he says, quote, "Now that I've stolen his Predator Eye, I don't need this team anymore." Now, for Barrow to steal it from him, it could mean that Snuffy has Predator Eye, but in chapter 216, we see a flashback of Snuffy teaching Barrow about Predator Eye, but it's strictly through dialogue, not through demonstration, and Barrow just practiced what Snuffy told him and then gains the eye. So maybe Snuffy just has the IQ to describe how to make goals and he doesn't actually have the eye himself, but I just thought it was something interesting. Maybe he has it, maybe he doesn't. Next up is Chris Prince, who I think is sort of overlooked in these conversations, and I think at the very least has a decent case for the world's second best. According to his dialogue with Noah, he was apparently ranked number 2 in the previous year's Top European Player Award. However, this achievement is possibly diminished by the fact we don't know if Loki was even a pro player at this point, and Marc Snuffy debatably was retired at this time. Additionally, this is just a one-season award, kind of like an MVP. It's quite possible that Prince just had a stellar above normal season, and that doesn't mean he's consistently the world's second best. We see players in real sports leagues win MVPs all the time, and it doesn't necessarily mean they're the best or the second best. Prince does have some decent feats. He's defended by Noah similar to Noah defending Loki for a few brief instances. However, Noah is able to get the jump on him and get a clear, and that's mostly the full extent of their physical and skill interactions. Chris did develop a shot to quote-unquote surpass Noah, but it's just an unpredictable shot that can be detected by metavision users. Isaki is able to sense the danger zone of the shot, so anyone with metavision should just be able to stop this shot, or at least have a chance to stop the shot. Something interesting is there's multiple characters that call him the world's number 2. Now, it's unclear if this is in regards to the award that Prince lost out to Noah on, or if he's actually just legitimately the world's second best player. I think it's probably more fair to say it's in reference to the award, and they're just trying to mock him for coming in second by a record margin, according to Noah. But we aren't really for sure. Maybe this is just actually saying Prince really is the second best player in the world, but I think it's probably more likely a mocking statement by the characters that say it. You really need to bank on the MVP award statement to make a case as the world's second best for Prince, as he seems to have worse showings than someone like Loki, who Noah himself seems to think is a bigger threat to him. Finally, we have Lavinho, who I'm not going to say can't be the world's second best, but he's almost definitely implied by showings to be the weakest of the 5 captains of the Neo-Egoist League. He doesn't have any notable statements like Loki, Prince, or Snuffy that could assert him as high as the second best in the world, and he doesn't do anything that seems far outside the range of the other captains to make him seem any better than any of them either. He also seems to be outmaneuvered and outplayed for a brief moment by Chris Prince, and Prince is one of the best players in the world. That's not really something bad, but it's just something notable. He's still obviously a very potent pro player, but with the additional revelation of him being potentially more of a bunny rival, it sort of paints him on the lower end of the pro players that we do see. Now, before we conclude, I do want to touch on the first set of pro players we saw in Blue Lock, that being some of the characters we saw at the beginning of Third Selection's World All-Star game. And in Blue Lock's special meeting room, one of the random chairmen in there says the world's top players get $1 million each, plus a 10 grand bonus for each goal, with the context being that the Blue Lock program is spending an absurd amount of money just to get these players to show up. But the more important thing here is they're called the world's top players. However, there's almost no other information for us to go off of. In this game, we saw 5 pro-level players playing against Third Selection Blue Lock players, but deducing anything from these interactions is really difficult. They obviously give the Blue Lockers the belt while seemingly holding back, so quantifying any of them isn't exactly easy. One of them is just Loki, who we already went over, and there's really no statements about their skill level or anything to assert them as the world's second best. The character with the best case is probably Leonardo Luna, since his nickname is the Prince of Real. Now, this is important for a few reasons. The first being in chapter 240, we learn that Real is the strongest club in the world. So Luna being the prince of the strongest club in the world could imply he's the best player on that team. If you're wondering why he wasn't in the Neo-Egoist League, it's because in real life, Spain has 2 teams in the same league, that being FC Barcelona and the actual real-life Real Madrid. The Neo-Egoist League used FC Barça and not Real for whatever reason, but Luna is in the same league as these other teams, at least based on how real-life soccer works, and he might just be the best player on that team. With all this given information, I think the safest bets for the second best player in the world of Blue Lock are either Julian Loki or Marc Snuffy. They both have very high caliber statements to their name from Noah himself, and it just comes down to interpretation on which player you think has a better case of being the number 2 player in the world, with my sleeper pick for the second best player in the world being Leonardo Luna. I do want to say I'm scripting this at the end of the Nigeria game for Blue Lock, so if any characters are introduced after this point, or we get feats that show that someone's either stronger or weaker, I'm obviously not Mewtwo, and I'm not gonna know that, so if that does happen, don't hold it against me, as I just can't account for that right now. In conclusion, my top 3 candidates would be Snuffy, Loki, and Leonardo Luna as a potential third.